I stood on the graduation stage, clutching my diploma, looking at the empty row reserved for my family. They were all at my sister's art opening, an event she scheduled to spite me. So, I used the one legal document they forgot about to evict her gallery. The silence inside my head was louder than the applause thundering through the university stadium. It was a humid Saturday in May, the kind of heat that makes your gown stick to your back and sweat bead at your temples, but I felt freezing cold. I sat in the third row, seat C14. To my left was a girl named Sarah, whose parents had been waving a giant foam finger with her face on it for the last hour. To my right was a guy named David, whose entire extended family, grandparents, aunts, cousins, took up 2 full rows behind us. They had air horns. They had bouquets of flowers that smelled like lilies and expensive perfume. And then there was my row D, seats 10 through 14. I turned around for the 50th time in 20 minutes. The seats were empty, not just empty in the way that says someone is running late or stuck in the parking lot traffic. They were stark, plastic blue voids in a sea of humanity. I had placed reserved signs on them myself weeks ago, reserved for the family of Maya Lin. The paper signs were still taped there, fluttering slightly under the blast of the stadium air conditioning. Maya Lin, the dean's voice boomed over the speakers. It was my turn. This was the moment. The culmination of 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts at a coffee shop to pay for textbooks, and the sheer grit required to complete an architecture degree with honors. This was the moment I had told my parents about 6 months ago. The date had been highlighted on the kitchen calendar in red ink. I had sent calendar invites. I had sent reminders. I stood up, my legs felt like lead. I walked toward the stairs. Every step felt heavy, like I was dragging the weight of my disappointment behind me. I handed my card to the announcer. He glanced at it, then glanced at the crowd, expecting to see a pocket of cheering fans. Maya Lin, magna cum laude. I walked across the stage. I shook the dean's hand. He smiled, a practiced, polite smile, and handed me the faux leather folder that held my degree. "Congratulations," he said, his voice drowned out by the ambient noise. I looked out into the blinding lights of the arena. I squinted, desperate to see a hand wave, to see my dad's bald head, to see my mom's red coat. I needed to see them rushing down the aisle, apologetic, breathless, holding a balloon, anything. Nothing, just the empty blue seats. The applause was polite, scattered. It was the applause of strangers who clap because it's the social contract, not because they care. I walked off the stage, the flash of the professional photographer blinding me for a second. As my vision cleared, I saw families rushing to the railing to hug their graduates. I saw fathers crying. I saw mothers fixing mortarboards. I walked past them all, clutching my folder so hard my knuckles turned white. I went straight to the exit tunnel, bypassing the return to my seat. I couldn't sit there anymore. I couldn't look at the empty space where my life was supposed to matter. I pushed through the heavy metal doors and out into the corridor, finally alone. The concrete hallway was cool and quiet. I leaned my back against the wall and slid down until I hit the floor. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. 0 missed calls, 0 text messages. The time on the screen was 7:14 p.m. My sister's gallery opening started at 7:00 p.m. They weren't late. They weren't stuck in traffic. They were exactly where they wanted to be, and it wasn't here. The betrayal wasn't just in their absence, it was in the silence. It was worse than the diagnosis of loneliness itself. It was the confirmation that I didn't exist to them. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of red taillights and blurry vision. I didn't even bother taking off my cap and gown. I just threw them into the passenger seat of my beat-up Honda Civic, the car I bought with my own money, repaired with my own money, and insured with my own money. It sat there, the black fabric pooling like a shadow, looking ridiculous next to a fast food bag I hadn't thrown away. When I got into my apartment, the silence was suffocating. I had cleaned the place yesterday, thinking maybe, just maybe, They would want to come back here for cake after the ceremony. I had bought a small sheet cake from the grocery store. It said, "Congrats, Maya," in blue icing. I wrote the order form myself. I sat on my couch, the leather cold against my legs, and stared at the cake box on the counter. My phone buzzed. My heart jumped into my throat. Was it Mom? Was it Dad? Did they realize the time? Did they feel guilty? I snatched the phone up. It was a notification from Instagram. Leela Art just posted a photo. My stomach turned over, a physical wave of nous. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But my thumb hovered over the screen and I tapped it. The photo loaded in high definition. It was Leela, my older sister. She was standing in the center of the gallery, the chroma space, the trendiest new spot in the downtown arts district. She was wearing a shimmering silver dress that cost more than my entire semester's tuition. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and was laughing, her head thrown back in that performative, charming way she had perfected. And there, standing on either side of her, were Mom and Dad. Dad was wearing his good suit, the one he said was too tight to wear to my senior thesis presentation. Mom was wearing the red coat I had looked for in the stands. She was beaming, looking at Leela with a gaze of pure, unadulterated adoration. The caption read, "So incredibly proud of my visionary daughter. Opening night is a smash hit. Art Life Proud Parents Genius." Visionary, genius. I scrolled. There was Aunt Carol. There was Uncle Mike. Even my cousin Brad, who claimed he couldn't get time off work for my graduation, was in the background eating a canapé. They were all there, every single one of them. I didn't cry. I think I was past crying. I felt a strange, cold numbness spreading through my chest, hardening my heart like curing concrete. They hadn't just chosen her, they had erased me. There wasn't a single mention of my graduation. No, sad we missed Maya, but so proud of Leela. No text. No guilt. I zoomed in on the photo. I looked at the walls of the gallery. The exposed brick, the polished concrete floors, the high-end track lighting. It was a beautiful space. Expensive. Exclusive. My eyes drifted to the background of the photo, to the door frame. I knew that door. I knew the layout of that building better than anyone. I knew the HVAC system specs. I knew the square footage. I knew the lease agreement. A dark, bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was a sound I didn't recognize, devoid of any humor. They were toasting to Leela's success. They were celebrating her independence and her breakout moment. They were drinking expensive champagne and eating hors d'oeuvres in a building that they thought was secured by Leela's charm and Dad's negotiation skills. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who actually signed the paperwork. They had forgotten who had the credit score, the verifiable income, and the legal standing to secure that space when the landlord laughed at Leela's projected earnings and Dad's debt-to-income ratio. I closed the Instagram app and tossed the phone onto the cushion beside me. I looked at the cake again. I stood up, walked to the counter, opened the box, and cut myself a massive corner piece. I ate it standing up, staring at the wall. Enjoy the party, Leela. Enjoy the champagne, Mom and Dad. Because you're celebrating in a house of cards and you just handed me the wind. To understand why my family would skip my college graduation for an art gallery opening, you have to understand the mythology of Leela. In the Lin family, there were two roles. Leela was the muse, I was the mule. Since she was 5 years old, Leela was gifted. If she drew a stick figure, my mother framed it. If she hummed a tune, my father talked about getting her a jagged agent. She was the golden child, the fragile genius who couldn't be burdened with mundane things like chores, homework, or consequences. Her chaotic behavior, missing curfew, failing classes, spending rent money on inspiration trips, was always excused as part of her process. Then there was me, Maya. I was good at math. I was organized. I was quiet. I was the one who remembered to buy milk. I was the one who figured out how to set up the Wi-Fi. I was the one who filled out the FAFSA forms for my own college education because my parents were too busy helping Leela apply for art residencies in Berlin. My stability became my curse. Because I could handle things, they assumed I didn't need anything. I was the background noise to the opera of Leela's life. I worked 2 jobs all through college. I was a barista in the mornings and a freelance drafter for a construction firm at night. I paid for my tuition. I paid for my car. I even managed the family's emergency fund, a savings account I started when I was 16 because I realized my parents had zero financial literacy. They put money in occasionally, but I was the one who tracked the interest rates and ensured we didn't go bankrupt when the water heater died. "You're just so corporate, Maya," my mother would say with a sigh, looking at my architectural sketches. "It's all straight lines. Where's the soul? Leela's work has soul." 6 months ago, I sat them down at the kitchen table. "I have my graduation date," I said, sliding the paper toward them. "May 24th, 6:00 p.m. Please put it in your calendars." "May 24th, Dad said, nodding absently while scrolling on his iPad. "Sure, honey, that's great." "It's a big deal," I pressed. "I'm graduating with honors. I'm the first one in the family to get a STEM degree." We know," Mom waved a hand dismissively. "You're very smart, Maya, we'll be there." Leela was in the kitchen, eating a yogurt. She stopped, the spoon halfway to her mouth. I saw her eyes flick to the calendar on the wall. I saw the gears turn. "May 24th, she asked. Her voice was light airy, but her eyes were sharp. "Yes," I said. "Why?" "Oh, nothing," she smiled. It was a shark smile. "Just thinking about dates for my show. The gallery owner offered me a slot in late May." "Don't pick the 24th, I said, my voice dropping. "Leela, seriously, don't." She laughed, a tinkering, dismissive sound. "Relax, Maya. The world doesn't revolve around your boring ceremony. I'll figure it out." I thought that was the end of it. But Leela isn't just flighty, she is territorial. She demands total saturation of attention. If the spotlight shifts away from her for even a second, she feels like she's suffocating. 3 weeks later, the announcement went out. Leela Lynn, Abstract Realities. Opening reception, May 24th, 7:00 p.m. I confronted her immediately. "You picked the same night," I said, shaking the flyer in her face. "It was the only night the venue had," she lied smoothly. She was wearing a silk robe, lounging on the parents' couch like a queen. "Besides, your thing is in the afternoon, right? You can just come to my opening after. It's perfect. A double celebration." "My ceremony is at night, Leela. Mom and Dad can't be in 2 places at once." She shrugged, picking at a fingernail. "Well, I guess they'll have to decide what's more important. A piece of paper you get for sitting in a classroom, or the debut of my soul's work." I looked at my parents. I waited for them to step in. I waited for Dad to say, "Leela, change the date." I waited for Mom to say, "Maya asked first." Instead, Mom looked at the floor. "Maya, honey, this is a huge opportunity for your sister. The gallery scene is so competitive. You know how hard she's worked." "I've worked hard too," I whispered. "Yes, but you have a job lined up," Dad added, as if that explained everything. "You're set. Leela needs this support. Maybe we can split up, or maybe you can skip the ceremony. They mail the diplomas anyway, don't they?" I walked out of the room that day. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just kept reminding them of the date, hoping, praying that when push came to shove, they would do the right thing. But looking at that Instagram photo, I realized the truth. They didn't just choose her event because it was more important. They chose it because they are afraid of her. They are afraid of her tantrums, her moods, her guilt trips. They aren't afraid of me. They think I'm the rock. The one who will always be there, solid and unmoving, no matter how much they chip away at me. But even rocks can crack, and when they do, they can bring the whole mountain down. The trap wasn't something I set up maliciously. It happened a year ago. Leela had found this gallery space, the Chroma space. It was perfect. High ceilings, downtown location. But the landlord, a no-nonsense guy named Mr. Henderson, ran a credit check on Leela. He laughed her out of the office. Then he ran a check on Mom and Dad. Their credit was shot from bailing Leela out of credit card debt 3 times prior. They came to me begging. "We just need a cosigner, Maya," Dad had pleaded. "Just a formality. We'll pay the rent. Leela has investors lined up. We just need your name on the line because you have that fancy internship and the 800 credit score." "I don't want to be liable," I had said. "You won't be," Mom promised. "It's just for the paperwork. Please, Maya, if she doesn't get this studio, she'll be crushed. She's finally turning her life around." So I signed. I signed as the primary guarantor. I looked at my phone again, the picture of them toasting. They thought I was just the signature. They didn't realize that, as the primary guarantor, I had clauses in that contract. Specifically, Clause 14B regarding right of revocation in the event of financial insecurity, and Clause 9 regarding physical access and keyholder rights. I wasn't just a cosigner, I was the master tenant. The morning sun hit my face like an interrogation lamp. I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff, crumbs from the grocery store cake still on the coffee table. For a second, just a split second, I forgot. I had that heavy, groggy feeling of a hangover, but I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. I was hungover on grief. Then the memory of the empty seats rushed back in, filling my chest with cold water. I sat up and grabbed my phone. Sunday morning, 9:00 a.m. There was one text from my mother, sent at 11:30 p.m. the previous night. "You missed a great night. Leela sold a piece. We are all exhausted. Talk tomorrow." No apo. Logie, no happy graduation. Just a notification that I had missed my required attendance at the Leela show. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into my small home office, a corner of my living room with a drafting table and my laptop. I sat down and opened my computer. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I wasn't feeling sad anymore. The numbness from last night had calcified into something harder, sharper. It felt like steel. I was an architect. I knew that before you demolish a building, you have to disconnect the utilities. You have to strip the asbestos. You have to make sure the structure is isolated so that when it falls, it doesn't take the neighbors down with it. Step 1, the finances. I logged into the family emergency fund. This was a high-yield savings account I had set up 4 years ago. It was technically in my name, but I had given my parents authorized user access so they could deposit money or use it for actual emergencies, like the time the transmission blew on Dad's van. I contributed about 40% of the funds, money I had scraped together from my drafting gigs, intending it to be a safety net for us. I typed in my password. The dashboard loaded. My breath hitched. I blinked, leaning closer to the screen. The balance was $42.18. Last week, there had been $6,500. I clicked on transaction history. There, in black and white, were the withdrawals. May 20, withdrawal $2,000, transfer to Leela Lynn, May 22. Withdrawal $3,500, check 104 Elite Catering Services, May 24. POS transaction $950, vintage wine and spirits. My hands started to shake, not from sadness, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. They hadn't just ignored my graduation, they had financed their celebration of ignoring me with my own money. That catering, that champagne I saw in the photo, I paid for it. I paid for the party where they erased me. I took a screenshot, I printed it out. Step 2, the lease. I opened my digital filing cabinet and pulled up the PDF. Lease agreement, 1400 Broadway Ave, the chroma space. I scrolled through the legalese I had memorized a year ago. I found the clause I needed. Article 14.2, Guarantor Withdrawal. The primary guarantor reserves the right to withdraw financial backing with a 30-day written notice to the landlord. Upon receipt of such notice, the tenant must provide a substitute guarantor meeting the landlord's credit requirements within 7 days, or the lease shall be considered in default and subject to immediate termination. I didn't stop there. I needed to know exactly how precarious their situation was. I needed leverage that wasn't just spite. I needed professional leverage. I opened a new tab and did a search on the California State Business Entity Search for Leela Lynn Art, LLC. Status: suspended. Reason: failure to pay statement of information filing fees. She wasn't even a legal business entity anymore. She had let her LLC lapse. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved a year ago. It was Sunday, but I knew Mr. Henderson, the landlord, was a workaholic who managed his properties like a hawk. Henderson Properties, a gruff voice answered on the second ring. Mr. Henderson, this is Maya Lynn. I'm the guarantor for Unit 4B, the Chroma space. Maya, his voice softened slightly but remained guarded. I was going to call you on Monday. We have a problem. I know, I said, my voice steady. That's why I'm calling. I need to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning, and I need you to bring the ledger. The ledger? He asked. Maya, your sister is 2 months behind on the CAM charges, and I got a noise complaint last night that's going to cost a fine from the city. I was about to post a notice. 2 months behind. And yet, they spent $6,000 of the emergency fund on catering. Don't post the notice yet, I said, feeling the trap snap shut in my mind. Meet me tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. I'm going to solve your problem for you. I hung up. I looked at the printed bank statement. I looked at the lease. I had the fuel. I had the match. Now I just needed them to walk into the room. They didn't wait for me to come to them. At 1:00 p.m., my doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. I could hear Leela's voice through the wood, loud and complaining. I don't see why we have to do this. She's clearly just sulking. I opened the door. Leela breezed past me without looking me in the eye, carrying a massive bouquet of flowers that were clearly repurposed from her gallery opening. The edges of the lilies were already browning. Mom and Dad followed, carrying a box of pastries and looking aggressively cheerful. Surprise, Mom chirped, trying to hug me. I stood stiff as a board, my arms at my sides. She pulled back, sensing the coldness, and adjusted her red coat. Oh, Maya, don't look like that. We brought you croissants. And flowers, Leela added, dumping the vase on my dining table. She flopped onto my couch, the couch I bought in the apartment I paid for, and kicked off her heels. God, my feet are killing me. Standing in those Laobao tins all night was torture. But worth it. Maya, you should have seen the crowd. It was electric. Dad closed the door and gave me a sheepish smile. We're sorry we missed the ceremony, honey. But you know how these things are. The graduation is long, boring speeches. The gallery was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Once in a lifetime, I repeated, my voice flat. I walked over to the kitchen island, putting distance between us. Is that why you didn't call? Is that why you didn't text? We didn't want to disturb you, Mom said, her eyes widening in feigned innocence. We thought you'd be out with your friends, and honestly, Maya, you're being a little dramatic. You got your diploma. We're proud of you. Do we really need to have a funeral about it? Yeah, don't be a buzzkill, Leela called out from the couch. She was already scrolling on her phone. I sold a painting to the mayor's wife. I'm literally famous locally now. Can we focus on that? I looked at them, really looked at them. They looked like strangers. Entitled, selfish strangers who had broken into my house. I'm not being a buzzkill, I said, reaching for the folder I had prepared on the counter. I'm being an accountant. I slid the printed bank statement across the island toward my father. Dad, look at that. He frowned, picking up the paper. What is this? That's the emergency fund statement, I said. The fund I manage. The fund intended for medical emergencies or house fires. Dad's face went pale. Mom leaned over his shoulder. You drained it, I said, my voice rising just slightly. You took $6,000, my money, and you used it to pay for the party I wasn't invited to. Leela sat up, sensing the shift in the room. We didn't drain it, we borrowed it. I'm going to pay it back as soon as the check's clear. You spent my savings on champagne and catering, I said, locking eyes with her. while I walked across a stage to an empty row. It was an investment, Mom snapped, defensive now. Leela needed a high-end launch to attract buyers. You don't understand how the art world works, Maya. You have to spend money to make money. We did it for the family. For the family, I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. No, you did it for Leela. You always do it for Leela, but you forgot one thing. What? Leela sneered, standing up. That you're jealous? That you're a bitter little bean counter who can't stand that I'm the special one? No, I said calmly. You forgot who signed the lease. The room went dead silent. I spoke to Mr. Henderson this morning, I said. He told me you're 2 months behind on CAM charges. He told me about the noise complaints. And he told me that if the guarantor withdraws, the lease is void. You wouldn't, Dad whispered. He dropped the bank statement. It fluttered to the floor. I drafted the letter this morning, I said. I am formally withdrawing as your guarantor, Leela, effective immediately. I am also removing all of you from the bank account. Today. Leela's face twisted into an ugly mask of panic and fury. You can't do that. I have a show running for a month. I have collectors coming next week. If you pull the guarantee, Henderson will lock the doors. Then maybe you should have used the $6,000 to pay the rent instead of buying canapes, I said. You selfish bitch, Leela screamed. She lunged forward, but Mom caught her arm. You're trying to ruin me. You're just jealous because I have talent and you're just a worker drone. I am a worker drone, I agreed, nodding. I'm the drone that built the hive you're living in, and I'm taking my honey back. Maya, please, Mom said, tears suddenly streaming down her face, weaponized tears. Don't do this. This will destroy her. This will destroy us. We're family. You have to forgive us. I don't have to do anything, I said. Get out of my apartment. They left, but the war had just begun. For the next 24 hours, my phone exploded. Text messages from aunts I hadn't seen in 5 years telling me I was heartless. A voicemail from my grandmother saying I was bringing shame on the family. Leela posted a vague, tearful Instagram story about toxic energy and people preying on her downfall, which garnered hundreds of sympathy likes. But while they were fighting a PR battle, I was fighting a legal one. I took the day off work on Monday, my first day as a free woman, and met Mr. Henderson at his office at 8:00 a.m. sharp. Mr. Henderson was a man made of leather and cigar smoke. He sat behind a mahogany desk that looked like it weighed more than my car. He had the ledger open. You were right, he grunted as I sat down. The checks for the last 2 months, they bounced, insufficient funds. I felt a pit in my stomach, but they took the money from the emergency fund. $6,000, where? Did it go? Henderson slid a folder across the desk. It didn't come to me, but look at this. I opened the folder. It was a copy of an invoice for renovations. I scanned the itemized list. Installation of custom lighting grid, removal of non-load-bearing partition wall, unpermitted. Installation of wet bar. The total was $8,000. She modified the unit, Henderson said, his face red. Without a permit, without my approval. Clause 8 of the lease strictly forbids structural alterations. If the city inspector sees that missing wall, I get fined. She didn't use your money for rent, Maya. She used it to illegally remodel my building. I stared at the paper. Leela hadn't just been irresponsible, she had been reckless. She had destroyed property that I was liable for. If I withdraw my guarantee, I asked, what happens to the damages? If you withdraw, Henderson said, leaning back, the lease is terminated for breach of contract immediately. The security deposit is forfeited to cover the damages. If it exceeds the deposit, I sue, but he looked at me over his glasses. Since you're the one bringing this to me, and since you've been the only honest person in this mess, I'll cut you a deal. You help me get them out fast, before the inspector comes, and I won't come after you personally for the wall. Deal, I said without hesitation. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering the evidence. I pulled the bank records proving the theft. I got the copy of the unauthorized renovation invoice. I printed out the suspended status of her LLC. At 5:00 p.m., I drove to my parents' house. I didn't knock, I still had a key. I walked into the living room. It was a war room. Leela was pacing, screaming into her phone to someone about sabotage. Mom was on the iPad, probably trying to transfer money from credit cards that were already maxed out. Dad was sitting in his armchair, head in his hands. They froze when they saw me. "You," Leela spat, hanging up the phone. "Do you know what you've done? Henderson just emailed me a notice to cure or quit. He's giving me 3 days." "He's being generous," I said, dropping a heavy binder onto the coffee table. The sound made Dad jump. "What is this?" Mom asked, eyeing the binder like it was a bomb. "That," I said, pointing at it, "is the proof that you didn't just borrow my money. It's proof of fraud." "Fraud?" Dad stood up. "Now, Maya, that's a strong word." "Is it?" I opened the binder to the page with the renovation invoice. Leela illegally tore down a wall in a commercial building. That's a violation of the lease and a building code violation. I'm liable for that, or I was until this morning. I turned the page to show the LLC suspension. She's operating a business without a license. That's tax fraud. I turned the page to the bank statement. And taking money from a joint account for unauthorized personal use? That's theft. I spoke to a lawyer friend of mine. Since the amount is over $950, that's grand theft. A felony. Leela's face lost all its color. She looked at Mom. She's bluffing. She wouldn't arrest her own sister. "Try me," I said. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. "You stole from me to throw a party for yourself on my graduation night. You think I have any loyalty left?" "What do you want?" Dad asked, his voice shaking. "Maya, what do you want to stop this?" "I want my name off the lease," I said. "Which I've already done. I want the $6,000 returned to my account by tomorrow morning. I don't care if you have to sell the car or pawn the jewelry. And most importantly..." I looked at Leela, who was trembling, shrinking down into a terrified child. "I want you to tell everyone the truth. I want a public retraction of your victim narrative. You're going to tell the family that you stole from me, and that's why I'm shutting you down." "I can't do that," Leela wailed. "It'll ruin my reputation." "Your reputation is already a lie," I said. "You have until tomorrow morning, or I hand this binder to the police." The deadline was 9:00 a.m. on Tuesday. At 8:45 a.m., I was sitting in a coffee shop across the street from the Chroma space. I had a clear view of the large glass storefront. Inside, the lights were off, but I could see movement. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. Deposit received, $6,000. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They had found the money. I didn't want to know how, whether Dad took a loan on his 401k or Mom sold her vintage jewelry. That was no longer my problem. But the money was only half the demand. At 8:55 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from Facebook. A live video had started. Leela Lynn is live. I tapped the screen. Leela was standing in the middle of her gallery. She looked awful, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a simple gray t-shirt. Her eyes were red and puffy. Behind her, Dad was taking paintings off the wall. Mom was packing. "Bubble wrap into boxes." "Hi everyone," Leela said, her voice cracking. She looked directly into the camera lens, her usual arrogance completely gone, replaced by a raw, trembling fear. I have an announcement to make. The Chroma space is closing, today." The comments started rolling in immediately. "What? No, why? The landlord is evil." Leela swallowed hard. She looked off camera, probably at Dad, then back at the phone. "It's not the landlord," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And it's not toxic energy. It's me." She took a deep, shaky breath. "I lied to you all. I didn't secure this space on my own. My sister, Maya, co-signed for me. She supported me financially. And, last week for the opening, I used money from her savings account without asking. money she worked for. I did it because I was selfish and I wanted a perfect night. Tears started streaming down her face, real tears this time. I scheduled the opening on the night of her college graduation. I made our parents choose me over her. And because of my actions, because I broke the lease rules and stole from my sister, I have to close down. Maya isn't the villain. I'm sorry. She ended the video abruptly. I watched the screen go black. I looked up and through the window across the street. I saw Leela collapse onto a packing crate, burying her face in her hands. Mom went to her but stopped. She looked around the empty gallery at the half-packed boxes, and then she just stood there. The illusion was broken. The golden child was tarnished, and the mule had kicked down the stable door. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt a deep, exhausting relief. It was over. The weight I had been carrying for 22 years, the weight of their expectations, their negligence, their entitlement, was gone. I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and walked to my car. I had a job interview in Seattle in 3 days. I had packing to do. 2 weeks later, I was standing in an empty apartment. Not the one I had shared with my ghost of a life, but a new one. A loft in downtown Seattle with huge windows overlooking the Sound. I had gotten the job. The firm was prestigious, the pay was incredible, and for the first time in my life, nobody here knew me as Leela's sister. I was just Maya Lin, the architect. My phone rang. It was Dad. I debated not answering. I had blocked them for a week after the gallery closed, needing the silence to heal. But I knew I needed to set the final boundary. "Hello," I said. "Maya," his voice sounded old, tired. We didn't think you'd pick up." "I have 5 minutes, Dad. I'm unpacking." "Seattle, right?" he asked. "Your mother saw the LinkedIn update. That's far away." "That's the point," I said. "Listen, Maya," he sighed. "We're in a bad spot. Henderson kept the security deposit for the wall. We had to pay for the removal of the debris. Leela is back in her old room. She's not painting anymore. She's working at the mall." "Good," I said. "Honest work builds character." "We miss you," he said, his voice cracking. "We messed up, Maya. We know that now. We got so used to you being the strong one, we forgot you needed us too. The house is falling apart without you. I don't know how to log into the electric bill portal. Your mother keeps asking when you're coming for dinner." "I'm not coming for dinner, Dad," I said gently. "Not for a long time." "Are you ever coming back?" I looked out the window at the rain falling on the city. It was beautiful. It was clean. It was mine. "I don't know," I said, "but for now, I'm building something new. And this time, the foundation is just for me." "I understand," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Maya. Congratulations on your graduation." "Thanks, Dad," I said. 2 weeks late, but thanks." I hung up. I put the phone on the counter and picked up a framed photo. It was the only one I kept from that day. It was a selfie I took in the car, wearing my cap and gown, eyes red but chin up. I placed it on the mantel of my new fireplace. It wasn't a sad memory anymore. It was a reminder. It was the moment I graduated from being a daughter to being a person. I turned around and looked at my empty apartment. It was full of boxes, full of potential, and completely, wonderfully silent.